Hello and welcome to another edition of D&D Stories. I am your host Rob, and this is the show where I regale you of tales past, of Dungeons and Dragons, in particular when something cool happened. This is the Shroud, Part 3. When we last left our heroes, Draus, Hammerstone of the Undercroft, the Dwarven Fighter, and TheWriter of Hemlon, the human alcoholic ranger, they were heading north to find a pass in the mountains so they can easily and more quickly reach the fair city of Valdinor, for they have fell news. The barricade that has divided Orenthale with the Mercylands has fallen, and a horde of orcs, minotaurs and beastmen now march on the last secure hold in all of the land. This is where the hour turns to its darkest. One night, as they journey towards the mountain pass, Theodrex and Droskor had taken pause, they'd taken rest, and they had been met with a stranger who called himself Dracnus, a stranger who offered them to take them safely and securely to Valdinor almost instantaneously. But mistrusting the stranger, they chose to go on without him. The stranger insisted that he leave them with a precious gift, a glowing red dragon scale. And he said that if you would ever need his help, he will come to them if they merely hold the scale and say his name. Dracnus had also inferred that this would be a favour that would need to be returned. And Droskor and Theodrex did not trust him. So, belligerently, they turned down his offer of help. And they now press north alone. And that is where we rejoin our heroes. Droskor and Theodrex have been journeying for at least a day after their strange meeting with Dracnus around the campfire. They have been discussing what they believe may happen should they not reach Valdinor in time. Dracnus had inferred that on foot they will never reach it to warn them of the approaching army of Mercy. And they start to muse as to what Dragon Then's purpose is and how this is connected in some way to the events that have transpired at the barricade. It all seems to be happening at breakneck pace, and while they aren't fully aware of all of the details, something is definitely occurring behind the scenes, and they both intend to discover what. As time passes and our heroes continue their journey, they take it in turns looking at these strange necromantic blueprints they had discovered within the Valley of the Prophets, this strange archway with vicious-looking spikes jutting from it. What will this do? What is this thing's purpose? And why does Dragon Then want it constructed? All of these questions are racing through their minds when all of a sudden I ask them to make a spot check. Theodrex succeeds, his keen rangery eyes looking across the landscape, and they spy a figure walking towards them. They are in a lush, verdant area of Orenthale. As they are approaching this figure, they are walking down lush, green, grassy slopes. Every footstep that they make sends strange spores and leaves floating into the air above them. Lights glisten in the distance. This incandescent area of the world is simply a wonder to behold. And finally this figure arrives before them. He wears loose-fitting garments that flow in the light breeze, and he gives them a peaceful, contented smile, and he says, "Travellers, fair day to you. It is a joy to behold you here." Droskor and Theodrex just look at each other, and then back at this individual. My players are good role players. and they do a very good job of portraying these characters in a realistic way, or realistic enough for Dungeons and Dragons. But they have become paranoid. They have walked into many a situation that has landed them in trouble already, so they look upon everyone who is just out in the wilderness with suspicion. The stranger continues to behold them both, this contented, joyful expression locked upon them, and he reaches down to the ground and pulls a single flower from the grass and gently presses it into TheWriter's hand, and he says, "Peace be with you, brothers. The Windward Plains welcomes all." And he sort of slowly starts sliding away, sort of like maintaining that posture, that exact position. And they just watch him go. "That was weird," they say to each other. Well, we have a deadline. We need to keep moving. We need to keep pressing on. Otherwise, Valdinor will fall. So they continue on their journey. Now, TheWriter and Droskor's logic in this instance of travel is to travel north, so they are above a mountain range that divides Orenthale in half. They are then to travel east, and then finally south to a mountain pass that they can travel through so they can reach Valdinor, hopefully in time. This will then mean that they avoid the approaching forces of Mercy heading directly east from the barricade. Sounds very simple, but sadly, in Orenthale, or at least in all of Main Realm, such journeys are never quite so easy. They continue their journey through the Windward Plains, taking in the gorgeous sights, every step once again sending these lights and spores and leaves floating around them. They feel slightly uneasy. This place seems to be almost too good to be true. And then once again I ask for a spot check. They succeed, and in the distance I explain to them that a rabble of bright green orcs are charging at them over the hill. These orcs look a little different from the ones that had pursued them from the barricade. Rather than murky greyish kind of skin, these orcs are bright green and frothing at the mouth, and they charge TheWriter and Droskor. I demand that they roll initiative. Droskor and TheWriter crash against a line of these orcs that appear to be berserkers, wielding great double axes, swinging wildly at them left and right. The battle is crazy. It is literally crazy, because the orcs begin to laugh, a guttural, horrendous laugh, as they swipe left and right, trying to cut down our faithful adventurers. And then TheWriter starts laughing. Droskor looks in abject confusion as TheWriter takes another shot, cuts another orc's throat, rolls. All this time he's laughing. Droskor looks at him laughing and starts laughing as well. This is the best time of their lives. The orcs and TheWriter and Droskor appear to be having a ball, each of them enjoying killing the other more than the last. It is at this point that Droskor just manages to just stop just for a second. He rubs at his eyes as he's trying to get away from these crazed orcs. And as he opens his eyes again, he sees that the landscape around them is entirely changed. No longer can he see lush green fields and strange lights in the distance. He sees nothing but sky and clouds. He looks to the ground and he sees there is decking beneath his feet. There is a wooden rail next to him. They're on a ship. "What?" exclaims Droskor. He looks around. They are on a large galleon. And Droskor is able to peer over the edge, and he does not see water beneath the ship, but more clouds. And far beneath those clouds is Orenthale. Somehow, within the time it took for Droskor to rub his eyes, all of them, Droskor, TheWriter, and the crazed orcs, are now aboard a flying vessel, gliding through the sky as the battle continues. TheWriter is beginning to realise too that his surroundings have changed, and he looks at Drosk with horror in his eyes, complete understanding washing his face, making him pale as he's dodging and blocking attacks from these crazed orcs that just keep laughing. And they don't know what's going on, and it almost seems like when they both make the realisation that they are somewhere different, the ship lurches forward and begins to tip, beginning to nosedive, screaming out of the air. Droskor and TheWriter and these orcs aboard this now flying ship begin crashing out of the sky, careening towards the ground at a violent speed as the fight continues. Droskor is able to grab one orc, headbutts it and hurls it over the edge, and it screams, plummeting thousands of feet to its death. TheWriter is able to take another shot, killing another orc, and that sends it rolling down the deck and slamming into the bow of the ship, or the end of the bow of the ship. This ship is just belting out of the air, and Droskor is able to peer over the front of the ship and sees that this ship is going to smash directly into the mountains that they are going to attempt to pass. Time is running out. Droskor basically grabs hold of a rope, begins to wrap himself around it, tells TheWriter to do the same. TheWriter is able to hurl some rope around the mast itself, and ties himself to it like something out of a Greek myth, only there are no sirens awaiting for them at the bottom, only hard, solid ground. Droskor is looking in horror as the ground rapidly gets larger and larger and larger, and he's fumbling across all of his belongings, searching for something, and he pulls out the red dragon scale. What the smash! The ship slams into the side of the mountain. Wood splinters, masts, sails goes everywhere. Orcs go flying, smashing into rock, exploding in a violent display of blood and gore. TheWriter and Droskor are flung forward at such a violent speed their necks almost snap. Then they see nothing at all. TheWriter is the first to open his eyes. He is lying on his back in a field. He can no longer see strange light or floating leaves, or indeed a ship of any kind. He sits up. He looks to his side and sees that Droskor is slowly beginning to awaken as well. They are surrounded by a vast number of dead orcs, and standing above them, looking down with a very pleased smile on his face, is Dracnus. Oh, TheWriter lets out a groan, desperately trying to stand, but collapses, his weight too much for his own legs to bear at this stage. And Dracnus says, "Rest now, friends, rest. You've had a busy time of it. I'm afraid I owe you somewhat of an apology. You see, I neglected to inform you that the Windward Plains is a strange place." Droskor is desperately trying to get to his feet, but he's exhausted. TheWriter and Droskor are both exhausted at this point. So he just gives up and just lies on his side on the floor, and he says, "Strange. Yeah, bit of an understatement. Thank you. Thank you for that information." Dracnus says, "The Windward Plains is filled with a number of psychedelic spores that burst from the ground." TheWriter and Droskor now think back to the time they were walking down that slope and spores were rising into the air around them. Yes, they have a significant psychological effect on those who aren't entirely prepared. It is what the land wishes. This place, this part of Orenthale is alive, and it is malevolent. It would wish for you to stay here forevermore. It would content you with the hunger of battle and make you believe that you are happy here, make you never want to leave. And thus, it showed you what you wanted to see. Battle and adventure until the end of your days. That is what you saw. And Droskor is just staring at Dracnus with just like a violent fury in his eyes. And if he could move at this point, he would probably have swung his Urgrosh at him. Like, there's no way. Like, Dracnus just seems super happy about this. He seems super amused that these guys that turned down his offer before have now, you know, been taught a lesson, as it were. And Droskor says, "My legs, I can't. Oh, I can barely stand." And Dracnus says, "It is of little surprise you have been fighting for some time." "How long?" TheWriter asks, his hands shaking. He realizes he's shaking more than Droskor is. 5 days, Dracnus says. "What?" "Yes," says Dracnus, smiling that ever-present smile. "Yes, it has been 5 days, 5 days since you first set foot in this strange place. You have been busy, you have fought to exhaustion. Usually the Windward Plains would satisfy its prey until it cannot move, and then it just simply absorbs you. But thankfully I was here. Thankfully I was here to relieve you of your current condition and ensure that you could be taken to safety. Of course, it is all thanks to your dwarven friend here, my good ranger. He was the one who clasped at the scale I provided you with and called my name. And so, I shall deliver you. It seems only fair that I take you to the city, although what is left of it I cannot guess at this current stage." Theodrax is like shivering at this point, and it begins to dawn on the players that Theodrax and Matt, who plays Theodrax, has been taking into account when Theodrax has been drinking alcohol. We treat, strangely, the issue of alcoholism very, very seriously in this game. And that means that Theodrax hasn't had a drink for 5 days. The withdrawal would be a nightmare. It would be a waking nightmare. His bodily functions would be shutting down at this point. Matt asks, and he looks in, and Theodrax he says, "I'm going to have Theodrax look through his belongings to see if there's any of his alcohol left." But it had been established a while ago that he was running a bit low, and he has like a little sip of whiskey that he immediately drinks, but then his flask is entirely empty. Theodrax's entire nature changes, and he goes from this exhausted, broken man to now this feverish hunger for more alcohol. And he can't move. He's just exhausted. Droskor is exhausted. Valdinor is now under full assault from the Horde of Mercy. How are they going to help the city now that they're 5 days late? Dracnus looks down upon them, and perhaps there's even a glint of pity in his eyes. He says, "I will deliver you. I will deliver you to the city. But remember, if I am to do so, favor will be required of you in the future. Do you accept?" Droskor looks to the shivering wreck of Theodrax, who literally might not survive the journey, and then looks at Dracnus and says, "Yes." Dracnus had always been described to the players as having this great aura about him, this very real, tangible sense of power whenever you're near him. It is quite clear that this is not just some strange human wanderer that stalks throughout the wilderness, but indeed something far more powerful. Dracnus looks to them both and he says, "You might want to stand back." Theodrax and Droskor can barely move at this stage. Dracnus then moves away, as they do not move from their position on the ground. And he raises his arms, lifts his head into the air, and suddenly a great burst of ruby red incandescent light erupts from Dracnus's very core. Droskor and Theodrex shield their eyes in an attempt to stop the blinding light from just hurting their retinas, their tired retinas, and blinking. They can see this vast shape unfolding, this silhouette, vast scaly wings unfurling, a long serpentine neck and a sweeping large tail. Before them stands a red dragon, a colossal red dragon, gleaming with eerie supernatural red light. And in their minds they hear a voice, Dratness's voice, and he says, "Climb on." Through the skies of Orinthale, Dratness, the dragon, soars. Theodrex and Droskor clutching desperately onto his back as they fly post-haste towards Valdinor. As they are sailing through the air, this time for real, Droskor is getting a little bit worried. And the players are getting a little bit worried too, because they have not rested for 5 days. Dratness's booming voice echoes throughout their minds psychically, and he exclaims, "Fear not. Whilst you bathe in my aura, you will be revitalized. You will be able to fight as if rested." And Droskor and Theodrex look to each other and say, "That's convenient." And soon upon the horizon they see Valdinor gleaming in the very centre of Orinthale. However, it is surrounded by plumes of smoke, and even from as high up as they are, they can see the forces of the Mercylands converging upon the walls. It would seem that the entire city is now besieged, and Dratness, Droskor and Theodrex have arrived just as siege towers, battering rams, and catapults begin their grim work. Dratness now soars high above the walls, and it is apparent to the forces of both sides of the battle that something incredibly vast and powerful is looming in the air above them. Cries go up from the walls, each side convinced that the other has brought a red dragon to the party. Dratness's psychic voice echoes once again in their minds, and as Droskor and Theodrex behold the nightmare of battle beneath them, and he says, "I shall drop you upon the walls. My service to you is done. I have delivered you to Valdinor. You must fight this battle, not I." And Droskor and Theodrex instantly object. Of course, anyone would object. You have come to a battle with a red dragon, and now the red dragon is refusing to take part in said battle. "What do you mean?" they exclaim angrily, gripping onto the scales, trying to get the dragon's attention in some way. "What do you mean? You need to help us. There's no way we're going to be able to..." "Oh my god!" Dratness has swept sideways and flies low over the wall, tipping both Theodrex and Droskor from his back, and they careen down onto the wall. Droskor and Theodrex roll as they hit the battlements, right at the same time as siege towers slam against the walls of Valdinor and the bridges go down. Orcs and goblins pour from the siege towers and smash into the waiting forces of the Valdinor guard. Droskor and Theodrex instantly drop into combat mode. Initiative is rolled, and the Battle of Valdinor has truly begun. Now, in terms of the way this combat was run, I instructed the players that they have to defend this section of the wall from the forces of the Mercylands, and that is exactly what they go to do. Droskor and TheWriter are fighting harder than they've ever had in their entire lives. And the Guard of Valdinor are looking at these two in wonder, these dragon riders, these dragon warriors that just dropped from the sky and have joined them in the battle. And a number of them are looking to them for guidance, for orders. The forces of Valdinor appear to be in complete disarray. But thankfully, TheWriter and Droskor's appearance has rallied them in some way, and they're able to hold their own against the tide of greenskins pouring onto the walls. Droskor is fighting valiantly, Urgrosh in hand, bringing the axe down hard and then slamming the spear end into another one, hurling it from the wall, blocking an attack, and then slicing another one in half. TheWriter, however, isn't faring so well. He had been revivified by Dratnis, or at least whatever word you could choose to call being instantly rested, as it were. But sadly, TheWriter's dependence on alcohol is still gnawing at him. TheWriter's hand is shaking. He is an archer. That is his primary weapon. But his arm is shaking when he's going to take shots. And because he's not able to put as many enemies down as quickly as he normally does, this is meaning that he is getting hit more. Like, TheWriter is really having to work hard not to get hit. And the battle isn't going well for him at all. And this is explained to Matt, who plays TheWriter, and he does understand that by having this dependency on alcohol, when he is having that withdrawal, he does suffer certain penalties. And that is how that is, shown throughout the game, is that he has got significant negative modifiers on his rolls. And it's apparent that TheWriter is in trouble throughout the majority of this fight. He is getting pretty badly injured, and while they're able to push back the initial wave of orcs, more pour through. They hear a boom, boom, boom. They look down, they see a vast battering ram trying to smash the gates of Valdinor, and they know if the gates fall, then they are going to be completely overrun. The orcs will pour into the city, come up the stairs of the walls, and then they will be fighting a battle on two fronts rather than just the one. Things look dire in the Battle of Valdinor, and things are only going to get worse. Droskor hears a heavy footsteps approaching from behind. He wheels round and he sees a horrifying sight. Before him is an ogre, bedecked in battle armor. You can see pieces of pauldrons and breastplates that this foul creature is taken from the militia of this land and welded together to make his grotesque form of armor from bits of metal that he's stolen. In his hand he holds a massive spiked mace, and he brings it slamming down. Droskor is barely able to avoid the initial blow as this ogre is just smashing its way through the ranks of Valdinor to get to the dwarf. Clearly, Droskor has been sort of singled out as someone who definitely needs to be taken out. He's causing too much damage to the forces of the orcs and the rest of the Mercyland kind. And Droskor is now having to direct his attention, rather than the infantry of the orcs, he's having to direct his attention to this ogre that's acting almost like a shock trooper, one that is just there to smash through the ranks and take out significant players within the battle. Droskor is able to counter. He's able to fight back against this ogre, smashing his Urgrosh into the creature's knee, and then giving it a slicing uppercut as it staggers. But this thing is just bred for destruction. It's bred to bring down the races of the free lands, essentially. And Droskor is beginning to struggle against this thing. Remember that, all throughout this time, I should state, they have been kind of leveling up as they go. So you might be noticing that I'm stating that they're now in this battle where they're fighting loads of orcs. It's still obviously an encounter that I've kind of balanced, but I don't really... Anyway, the point is that there's now this even bigger threat in the battle as well. And it's becoming a bit too much. And Droskor's attacks, while successful and devastating, it doesn't look like it's going to be enough. And the ogre is leering down upon him as he goes to make another strike. Meanwhile, TheWriter isn't faring much better either. Still suffering from withdrawal, he is being flanked on either side by orcs, and he's able to take one out close quarters with his longsword. He's brought his longsword out because he just keeps missing with the bow, unfortunately, and he's out of arrows. He takes out one orc, and then another one dives on top of him and basically wrestles TheWriter to the ground, and is about to basically put like a knife through the ranger's throat when TheWriter is able to bring his sword just in a desperate attempt to slice at the orc, kills the orc, and it dies and lands on top of him. TheWriter notices something on the orc's belt as the creature lands on top of him. Droskor is still fending off this gargantuan ogre. Not actually gargantuan, not the size category, let's not get funny. Just, I need more descriptive words. But essentially this large ogre is just like smashing Valdinor guards out of the way, and he basically grabs hold of Droskor and lifts him into the air. Droskor takes his Urgrosh and just goes BAM! Cuts off the creature's arm. It falls to the ground. Droskor hits the wall painfully. The ogre looks down stupidly at its arm and sort of shrugs it off and takes his mace just in one hand now and goes to make a killing strike against the dwarf on the ground. TheWriter had spotted something on the orc's belt. It is a bottle of the filthiest, dirtiest, stickiest grog you could ever come across. Regardless, the ranger sees his opportunity to get back on form. He seizes the gourd of this disgusting grog and just downs it. All this horrendous alcohol just pouring into his beard. And TheWriter shoves the orc off him, takes a bow, his bow, and an arrow from the quiver of this orc, fires a shot from the ground in a desperate attempt to help Droskor. The arrow soars through the sky, straight through the ogre's throat. It stands there dumbfounded, its mace still in its hand like that, and then he drops it, staggers back, and falls backwards over the wall. Droskor is breathing heavily, like, looks over to TheWriter, and TheWriter gives one of those, like, kind of nods across the battlefield. There is a short moment where there is a lull in the battle. TheWriter and Droskor are able to take some health potions, and they're able to patch themselves up very, very briefly, and they're able to shout orders. They're taking over like the command of the defense of Valdinor. They're shouting orders. They're telling reinforcements to basically line up, spears up front, archers behind, and get ready for another wave as more orcs start pouring up the siege towers again. They're doing their best to try and break the siege towers, and then the orcs have no way of getting up to the walls, but they just don't have the firepower. They don't have the means to do it. So what they decide to do instead is to basically create a phalanx, basically a wall of soldiers that are going to be organised and ready with spears and pikes for the next orc assault. And sure enough, they come pouring out of the siege towers once again. Furious, maddened orcs, just slashing madly at the forces of Valdinor, and they hit this wall of armour, now more organised and better prepared for such an assault. Droskor stands basically in the heart of the phalanx, giving orders. However, he spots something. He spots something that makes his blood boil. I say, Droskor, you're looking through the chaos of battle, the din and the madness that surrounds you, and you spot a number of orcs that bear a particular symbol. Daubed in blood, there is a symbol of a red fang upon their armor. Some on their breastplates, some on their pauldrons, some on their helmets. And Droskor instantly recognizes this symbol. A symbol that reminds him of a grave and harrowing day in his past. And he takes up his Urgrosh and he breaks rank. Theodrex looks around and goes, Droskor, what are you doing? Droskor is ignoring all the orcs in front of him. He's desperately trying to fight his way through to the orcs that bear that symbol, the red talon. And he's cutting his way through them. And those he doesn't cut through, he just ignores. He's just getting struck by orcs. Opportunity attacks left and right to try and get to them. And Theodrex is losing his mind. He's like, we've just come up with like a fairly decent sort of defense for the second wave, and now this is happening. So Theodrex goes after him, trying to basically drag him back. Droskor reaches some of these red talon daubed orcs and starts attacking them, but they are immensely well armored and very strong and give as good as they get. Droskor hits their ranks, and they are trading blow for blow. Like, mechanically speaking, they are on a par. And these orcs, there are obviously more of them. It's just Droskor on his own. Theodrex is basically fighting his way through, trying to cover Droskor's back. And Droskor takes a critical, I think it was. At least it was something that basically like knocked him to the ground. On, as I mentioned in a previous episode, we used a critical table and a fumble table. And sometimes if the enemy's critical, they might knock you over or they might disarm you. Droskor is knocked to the ground. Theodrex is desperately trying to get to him again. The anger that has driven the dwarf could very well be his unmaking. And then they hear it. A colossal roar rings out from the sky. It echoes across the very land itself. Men, dwarf, and orc look up to the sky and behold a terrifying sight that would make your heart stop. A colossal red dragon has returned to the field of battle, and the siege towers erupt into a fiery explosion as the dragon does a strafe run. Fire blasting from its mouth, enveloping a number of the siege towers. Boom! Boom! The battering ram was about to smash through the gates when that is just caught up in dragon fire. Orcs are screaming on fire. They cannot believe what is happening. This fell omen of death from the sky raining down fire upon them. Their morale obviously snaps. And all of a sudden, the dragon is gone. In its place, floating in the air, is now the humanoid form of Dracnus hovering above the battlefield. His arms sort of outstretched like that as he was before. And he reaches out with a hand, lifts up one of the remaining siege towers, slams it onto the ground so it's sideways, and then telekinetically just thrusts it, and it just smashes through. Easily 100 orcs just smashed by the ruins of this siege tower, and some of them are sent flying into the air. Wilhelm scream and everything. He is just sending spells and firepower out from above the wall. Droskor and Theodrex look at Dracnus. Obviously they knew that he was powerful. Obviously they knew that he was something. Was he a dragon in human form? Was he just a human that can take dragon form? They don't know. What they do know is that what radiates from Dracnus now is pure death. He rains down destruction upon the forces on the wall. And the army of Mercy breaks. They fall back. Some of them are just hurling themselves off the wall, ablaze with dragon fire. Some of them are basically just surrendering, dropping weapons, doing anything they can to get away from Dracnus. It was at the last moment that this powerful being chose to intervene, and it seems, thanks to the forces of Valdinor, Droskor and Theodrex, and him, that the battle is won. Theodrex and Droskor are staring at Dracnus as he slowly floats down and lands upon the wall. And they look at him with a different light. Sure, they'd seen him turn into a dragon, but they hadn't quite witnessed, and have never witnessed, the devastation this being can wrought. And Theodrex eventually speaks and he says, I thought you weren't going to help us. We owe you a favor. And he says, yes, that is correct, Ranger. You do still owe me a debt. Look on today as an act of kindness. And at the word kindness, they look beyond Dracnus and just see the devastation, fires still blazing across the battlefield. And they look back at him. They don't say anything. And Dracnus says, I told you before, you are both key players and will affect significant events in the battles to come. For now, go in peace, Droskor Hammerstone and Theodrex of Hemnon. You have fought with honor, and I will see you again. And he just sort of starts walking away across the battlefield, of the battlements. And people part as he walks by this insanely powerful individual. And the soldiers are staring at Dracnus, but then their vision turns to Droskor and Theodrex, these two individuals that rode the dragon and brought them victory here on the walls of Valdinor. And a cry goes up, to the Dragon Warriors, the Dragon Riders. They instantly, they are given many different nicknames regarding dragons. Generally, the one that sticks is the Dragon Warriors. These warriors that just dropped from the sky and brought them victory. And they are heralded as heroes and are hastily bandaged up and taken away where they can rest. Some of the forces of Valdinor basically go on a sweep. They sweep some of their forces out to basically take out any stragglers, any orcs or goblins or any creature that is left, to take them out so they can't rally and then come back at the walls. But really, that entire horde has been destroyed. And it would seem that the land of Orenthale and the city of Valdinor is secured. As Theodrex and Droskor are being heralded as heroes, they are taken with the surviving forces of Valdinor instantly to the mess hall, where they begin to drink heartily. There is an air of celebration, but it's also slightly mournful because a number of people lost their lives in defense of the city. And as Theodrex and Droskor are led down the road to the mess hall, and when they're in the mess hall, people are throwing flowers down upon the road in thanks to all of the soldiers that stood in defense of the city. And they are drinking heartily, and do so into the night where much revelry and celebration is had. It's only when there's a quiet moment that Droskor and Theodrex are sat at a table, their heads swimming with ale. Theodrex is now well and truly happy that he's got a significant amount of alcohol back in his system. And TheWriter says, I've travelled with you for some time now, Droskor, and I've noticed that you are a warrior born, and you fight with a passion and rival with any. And Droskor's like, yeah, cheers. Keeps drinking. But the look on your face when you saw those orcs, without marking, the red fang talon, Droskor corrects him angrily. His face changes instantly, like he was happy and merry, and now he's thinking about it again. What is it? Droskor looks down and he says, that talon, it is the banner that they wear, and it is the mark of my failure. What do you mean? Says TheWriter. Not long before we met in the forest, I had been travelling with a number of my kind. We were an expedition that I decided to lead from the Undercroft. I rebelled against the orders of my father, and instead of remaining at home and fulfilling my duties as a lord of the Undercroft, out of stone and steel, I led them away from home. We were ambushed in the southern regions of Nirendel, my homeland, and everyone died. Everyone but me. And the culprits bore that mark. I vowed if I would ever see it again, I would not let anything stop me from taking their lives and avenging my fallen brothers. I failed them. TheWriter looks thoughtfully down at his drink, swilling the remaining foam of his beer. And he says, you fought with honor today, Droskor. And you fought in their name. And that is what you've got to remember. And his voice is slurring from his drunken stupor. You have a new brother now. And both of them, their lips sort of tremble. And they go, mate, come here. And they hug it out. Finally, there is kinship between them. Finally, there is something more than the bickering that they often resort to. These two have gone through a lot together, and finally they're able to celebrate and they're able to relax. And their revelry echoes into the night. The night that is dark and hides many things. High atop the tallest mountain in Orenthale, the structure known as the Shroud has been completed. And slowly and surely, with dark power in its heart, it awakens. And that is where we will leave our heroes for this edition of D&D Stories. One battle is over, but a greater one is yet to come. Will Droskor and TheWriter triumph over the darkness of the Shroud and the evil of Dragon then? Well, you're just going to have to find out next time in the concluding chapter of the Shroud, only here on D&D Stories. Thank you for watching, and, of course, as always, keep gaming.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out the D&D Stories Facebook, Patreon, and t-shirts on Redbubble. Keep gaming!